I didn't expect to wake up next to a complete stranger in the middle of the university library, but hey, life has a strange way of throwing curveballs. It was one of those nights where I was so wiped out from cramming for finals that I figured the library's back corner, usually empty and quiet, would be a safe place for a power nap. I wasn't planning on anything romantic or even particularly interesting. Just a quick 20-minute sleep to reboot my brain before diving back into my mountain of textbooks. I remember settling down on one of those old, wooden benches near the history section, burying my face in my hoodie. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, and the only sounds were the distant tapping of keyboards and the occasional whisper of pages turning. I was dead tired, and before I knew it, I drifted off. What I didn't expect was to wake up to someone else's warmth pressed against my side. When I opened my eyes, the library was still dark. Most of the desks were empty, and the big windows showed the faint glow of streetlights outside. But the weird thing was that I wasn't alone. Right next to me on the same bench was this guy. He was fast asleep, head resting against my shoulder in a way that was somehow both awkward and kind of intimate. His hair was tousled like he'd just rolled out of bed, and he had this peaceful look that made me hesitate before moving. I didn't even know his name. I guess I could have just slid away quietly. But there was something about the way he looked so comfortable that kept me still. Maybe it was the fact that his jacket smelled faintly of coffee and something like cedarwood. Or maybe it was just pure curiosity. I glanced around, half expecting a librarian to walk in and shush us both, that the place was deserted. I'm usually pretty private, not the type to share benches with strangers. But there was a strange sort of calm in that moment. The stress of finals, the late nights, the loneliness, it all felt a little less heavy with him there. When he stirred, blinking and casting a confused glance at me, I realized I'd been holding my breath. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. He smiled, sheepish and a bit embarrassed. Hey, sorry, I guess I crashed here too. Finals week, you know. And just like that, the ice was broken. It turned out he was in my literature class, someone I'd seen around but never actually talked to. His name was Alex, and he was the kind of guy who made you feel like everything was going to be okay, even if you were up at 2 a.m. in a nearly empty library, waking up next to a stranger. I don't know how we ended up there exactly, two exhausted students, seeking refuge from the chaos of exams. But maybe that's where the story really starts. Because sometimes, the most unexpected moments turn into something you never saw coming. Finals week, you know, he said again, rubbing the back of his neck like he was trying to erase the awkwardness of waking up in such a weird situation. I chuckled, feeling my nerves loosen up for the first time in hours. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm surviving on panic and bad coffee at this point. He grinned, eyes still a little blurry from sleep. Same here. What class? Literature, I said. Your lectures always make me want to sleep even more. Alex laughed, a genuine, easy sound that felt like it belonged in a movie scene or something. That's not a compliment, but I'll take it. We sat up slowly, both stretching out our cramped limbs like we'd been trapped in some kind of library prison. I noticed his backpack was stuffed with notebooks and a battered copy of some poetry anthology. He glanced at mine, and suddenly the whole exam season felt a little less oppressive. Like we were in this together, even if we barely knew each other. So, I said, trying to figure out what to say next, because clearly, waking up next to someone in the library isn't exactly common small talk. What made you crash here? Library naps aren't exactly comfy. Alex shrugged, running a hand through his hair again, this time with less awkwardness. I was working on a paper, got too tired, figured I'd just close my eyes for a bit, and, well, guess I underestimated how tired I was. Same, I admitted. Thought a quick nap would help. Turns out, it's kind of a trap. He laughed. Yeah, the nap trap. Classic. We both fell silent for a moment. The kind that's not uncomfortable, but kind of peaceful, like the world had slowed down for a bit. I stole a glance at him. Casual, but curious. There was something about his face that made me want to know more. Maybe it was the way he frowned slightly when concentrating, or how his eyes lit up when talking about his passions during class. So, what's your paper on? I asked, trying to get beyond the nap thing. He smiled, A little shy now. It's about queer literature, how it's evolved over the last century. I've been reading some really amazing stuff, but it's also kind of personal for me. That caught me off guard. He was pretty open for someone I'd just woken up next to in a library nap scenario. Personal how? I asked, genuinely interested. Alex shrugged again, but there was a softness in his eyes. I'm still figuring myself out, I guess. It's scary sometimes. Writing this paper has been cathartic. I nodded, feeling a strange connection. Here we were, two stressed-out students hiding in the quiet of the library, and suddenly the walls felt a little less lonely. You're not alone, I told him quietly. I get it. College is supposed to be this amazing experience, but sometimes it's just overwhelming. He looked at me then, really looked, and smiled a little wider. Thanks, man. That means a lot. We packed up our stuff awkwardly, neither of us quite ready to break the bubble we'd found. The library was starting to brighten with the early signs of dawn, and the janitor's footsteps echoed faintly in the distance. Coffee? I asked suddenly, hoping to stretch this unexpected connection. Alex's face lit up. Absolutely. I need it like water. We left the library together, stepping into the chilly morning. The campus was quiet except for the occasional bird call and the soft hum of streetlights fading. We walked towards the nearest cafe, a small place that stayed open late for students like us. Sitting across from each other, mugs warming our hands, the conversation flowed easily. We talked about our majors, favorite books, terrible study habits, and the ridiculous amount of energy drinks we'd consumed. It was comfortable, like sitting with an old friend even though we'd just met. At one point, Alex leaned forward, lowering his voice a bit. Thanks for not freaking out when you woke up next to me, I laughed. Honestly, I was more surprised than anything, but then again, this whole week has been a series of surprises. He smiled, and for the first time, I noticed the subtle nervousness behind it. Do you want to hang out more after finals? Like, without the napping and libraries part? I caught myself grinning like a fool. Yeah, I'd like that. We exchanged numbers, that awkward but hopeful moment where everything feels like it could go either way. As I walked back to my dorm, clutching my empty coffee cup, I couldn't shake the feeling that this strange, unplanned morning was the start of something different. Not just another fleeting college connection, but maybe something real. And honestly, for once, that felt kind of amazing. For the next few days, finals took over like a noisy storm. Pages to read, essays to write, and caffeine to consume. But every time my phone buzzed with a message from Alex, it felt like a small island of calm amidst the chaos. It started with simple things. A good luck on your paper, or did you survive that math exam? But slowly, our conversations stretched longer, diving into dumb jokes, music recommendations, and the kind of late-night ranting that only happens when you're both too tired to care about sounding cool. One evening, a few days after our accidental wake-up call, I found myself staring at my phone in the middle of the library again, this time fully awake and voluntarily putting off studying. Alex had just texted me, "You up? I found the weirdest poetry reading downtown. Want to check it out after finals?" I hesitated. Going out on a random poetry reading wasn't exactly my usual Friday night move, but something about the idea of spending time with him outside of textbooks and exams was too tempting to pass up. Sure, I replied. I'm in. When the week finally ended, we met up as planned, outside this tiny, dimly lit cafe that was hosting the event. It wasn't crowded, just a handful of people sipping cheap wine and listening to folks read everything from heartfelt poems to awkward experimental stuff. Alex looked comfortable in a way I hadn't seen before, laughing easily, sharing side comments, and even grabbing my hand briefly when he found a poem that moved him. That small touch hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't like I hadn't noticed him before, but suddenly, his presence felt different, warmer, more urgent, and maybe a little scary because I wasn't sure if I was ready for whatever this was turning into. Afterwards, we walked through the quiet streets, the city lights shimmering behind us. You're full of surprises, I said, grinning. Alex shrugged, a playful smirk tugging at his lips. I'm like a mystery novel you don't want to put down. I laughed, but there was truth in that. The more time I spent with him, the more I wanted to peel back the layers and understand what made him tick. But I also sensed there were parts of him he was holding close, locked away. One night, after a late study session that left us both drained, we ended up at my place, sprawled out on the couch with takeout boxes scattered around. The city buzzed outside, but inside, it was just us and the quiet hum of the TV. Alex looked at me, vulnerability flickering in his eyes. "Can I be honest about something?" "Always," I said, feeling my heart beat a little faster. He took a deep breath. "I've never really told anyone this, but coming out to my family didn't go well. It was rough. Sometimes I think that's why I bury myself in school and books. It's easier than dealing with all that." I reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "I'm sorry you had to go through that." He smiled softly, the kind of smile that says, "Thanks for listening." "It's okay. It made me who I am, I guess. But it's still scary to put myself out there." "I get it," I said quietly. "I've had my own battles. Sometimes I just feel like I'm pretending to be someone else, so people won't look at me differently." There was a pause, the kind where words aren't necessary because we both understood each other perfectly. It was one of those moments that felt huge, like the world had shifted just a little. Over the next few weeks, things between us unfolded naturally. We studied together, shared crappy instant noodles at midnight, and slowly the walls we'd both built started to crumble. I found myself wanting to know everything about him, the silly things he did when no one was watching, his favorite childhood memories, even the fears he tried to hide. One afternoon, we were sprawled out on the grass in the campus quad, the sun warming our faces. I was half listening to his story about a disastrous family holiday when he suddenly looked up at me, eyes searching. "Can I ask you something?" he said hesitantly. "Shoot. Why did you stay next to me that night in the library? When you could have just walked away?" I thought about it for a second. Honestly, I don't know. It felt right. Like maybe I needed that moment as much as you did. He smiled, and the way the sunlight caught his eyes made my chest tighten. "I'm glad you did." That simple admission opened something between us, a quiet understanding that whatever this was, it wasn't just a fleeting thing born out of exhaustion and awkwardness. It was real. But as finals faded into summer and life started pulling us in different directions, internships, family visits, plans for the future, we both knew the biggest test was still ahead. Figuring out what this meant beyond stolen library naps and late-night coffee runs. And honestly, I was willing to take that risk. One step at a time. Because sometimes, the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most unforgettable stories. That summer stretched out ahead of us like an open road, but neither of us had a map for where it might lead. After the whirlwind of finals, the intensity of school faded, replaced by a slower pace that felt strange but also kinda nice. No more late-night cram sessions or library naps. Just the chance to breathe and figure out what came next. Alex and I started spending more time together outside of campus, discovering little pockets of the city neither of us had really explored. We wandered through street fairs, stopped at hole-in-the-wall coffee shops, and even tried our hands at cooking dinner in his cramped apartment. I'm not gonna lie, some of those meals were disasters, but we laughed through the smoke alarms and burnt edges like it was part of the fun. One evening, we found ourselves at a quiet park, sitting on a bench under the stars. The air was cool but not cold, and the city's distant hum felt like a soft soundtrack to our conversation. "I never really got to ask," I began, watching him trace patterns on the wood with his finger. "What got you into literature? Especially queer literature?" He paused, eyes reflecting the faint glow of street lamps. "It started with this book I found when I was a teenager. It was the first time I saw someone like me, written honestly and without shame. It made me feel less alone, like I wasn't some weird secret." I nodded, understanding more than I could put into words. "I get that. Finding pieces of yourself in stories, that's powerful." He looked at me then, a little hesitant. "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something? Like you're stuck on the edge of figuring yourself out but scared to jump?" That hit closer than I expected. All the time, I admitted, especially with who I am. It's like there's this part of me I'm still trying to accept. He reached over and squeezed my hand gently. "You don't have to do it alone." The sincerity in his voice made my chest tighten. I wanted to tell him so many things, but the words tangled up inside me. Instead, I just smiled, grateful that he was there. As the weeks rolled on, our routine settled into something comfortable but meaningful. We weren't rushing, just learning how to be together without the pressure of expectations. Some days were filled with deep talks and shared dreams, others just quiet moments where words weren't needed. One afternoon, I invited Alex over to my place to watch an old movie I loved but rarely admitted to liking. We sprawled out on the couch, a blanket between us, popcorn on the coffee table. Halfway through, his head found its way onto my shoulder, and I didn't move it away. It felt natural, like the two of us fit together in a way that made sense, even if I wasn't sure where it was going. But as summer edged closer to fall, reality started to creep back in. Internship offers, family plans, and the uncertainty of what came next cast a shadow over the easy days we'd been sharing. One evening, after a long walk through the city's bustling streets, Alex stopped and looked at me seriously. "I'm leaving next week for an internship across the country." I blinked, a knot forming in my stomach. "When did this happen?" He shrugged, trying to keep his voice light. "It's a great opportunity, and I can't pass it up. But I don't want to lose what we have." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. Neither do I. The following days were a blur of packing and goodbyes. We spent every free moment together, stealing kisses in quiet corners and promising to stay in touch. But beneath the surface, I felt the weight of distance looming between us. The night before he left, we sat on my balcony, the city lights twinkling below. "I don't want to say goodbye," Alex whispered. "Then don't," I replied, reaching for his hand. He smiled, a mix of hope and sadness. "Maybe this is just, see you later." I nodded, holding on to that hope with everything I had. "See you later." That night, as I watched him walk away, suitcase in hand, I realized that sometimes love isn't about perfect timing or easy answers. It's about the moments you share, the risks you take, and the hope that what you found is worth fighting for, no matter the distance. And maybe, just maybe, that unexpected wake-up call in the library was the start of something neither of us could have predicted, but both desperately needed. The first week after Alex left felt like the world had lost some of its color. The apartment suddenly seemed too quiet, the couch too empty, and my phone's silence was deafening. I kept expecting to get a text or a call, some little sign that we were still connected, but the time zones, his new schedule, and the constant whirlwind of his internship swallowed up most of our communication. I won't lie, there were moments when I wanted to throw in the towel. Long nights scrolling through social media, seeing pictures of him at new places with new people, made me feel like a spectator in his life rather than someone living it with him. I started to wonder if I was just a footnote in a chapter he was eager to close. One Friday night, after skipping a few study group meetups and barely touching my own assignments, I found myself back in that familiar place, the library's back corner. The same bench where we had first met in that ridiculous sleepy way. The old wooden bench didn't care that it was no longer final season, and neither did I. I plopped down, pulling my hoodie tighter around me, the silence stretching out like a blanket that was both comforting and suffocating. I thought about texting him but stopped myself. Maybe he was busy. Maybe I was making a mountain out of a molehill. As I closed my eyes, memories of that morning flooded back. The way he fell asleep against me, the nervous smile when he woke up, the slow, easy conversations over bad coffee. I hadn't realized how much I'd craved that kind of closeness until it was gone. Just as I was about to pack up and go home, my phone buzzed. My heart jumped. It was a message from Alex. "Hey, can we video chat? I miss you." I stared at the screen, disbelief mixing with relief. I typed back, fingers trembling. Yeah, absolutely. The call connected and there he was, smiling, but tired. The distance was real, but in that moment, it felt a little smaller. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. The internship challenges, my classes, the mundane details of daily life that suddenly seemed precious when shared. He told me about the weird, tiny coffee shop he'd discovered, and I described the crumbling mural behind the library that I'd never noticed before. When the conversation lulled into a comfortable silence, I asked, "How are you holding up?" He sighed. "Honestly, it's harder than I thought. I miss home. I miss you. I thought I was ready for this, but sometimes it hits me out of nowhere." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I miss you too. Every day." He looked at me, eyes searching. "Do you think this can work? Long distance, I mean." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say yes and mean it, but another part was scared of getting hurt. Then again, wasn't love always a risk? I want to try, I said finally. I think what we have is worth it. He smiled, that soft, hopeful smile that made my chest ache. Me too. That night, video chats became a routine. We shared our days, our frustrations, and our little victories. It wasn't the same as being together in person, but it was enough to keep the thread of us alive. Still, the physical absence gnawed at me. I missed the way his hand felt in mine, the way his laugh filled a room, the simple comfort of falling asleep beside him instead of alone. The weeks stretched on, each one a test of patience and trust. One weekend, Alex surprised me with a plan. I'm coming home next month, just for a weekend. I couldn't hide the grin that spread across my face. You have no idea how much I'm looking forward to that. When he finally stepped off the bus that chilly October evening, the world felt right again. We hugged like we'd been apart for years, not just weeks. His jacket smelled the same, coffee and cedarwood, and I realized that some things don't change. We spent that weekend wrapped up in each other, making up for lost time. We cooked together, this time without any kitchen disasters, walked through familiar streets, and talked late into the night about plans, fears, and dreams. One night, as we sat on the porch swing, Alex turned to me, eyes serious. I don't want to go back without a plan. I want us to have something solid. I nodded, understanding the weight behind his words. Me too. Let's figure this out together. We spent hours sketching out possibilities, summer internships in the same city, apartment hunting, and even the terrifying idea of coming out to our families together. It was messy and uncertain, but it felt like the first real step toward building a future. The weekend ended too soon, but the spark between us was stronger than ever. As he left, I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Alex, it felt worth every bump and detour. Back in my apartment, I sat by the window, watching the leaves fall and the city lights flicker. Love had come into my life in the most unexpected way, starting with a sleepy morning in the library and growing into something real and fierce. And now, I wasn't ready to let go. Not anytime soon. The weeks that followed Alex's visit were a strange mix of hope and tension. We were both trying to juggle the usual college chaos with the new, daunting task of making this long-distance thing actually work. It wasn't just about sharing texts or video calls anymore. It was about figuring out how to carve out space in each other's lives that felt real and steady, even when we were miles apart. One night, I was sitting at my desk, nursing a cup of cold coffee, when my phone buzzed. It was Alex. Can we talk? Like really talk? My heart did that stupid flip-flop that it always did when it came to him. I typed back, "Yeah, what's up?" A few minutes later, his face popped up on the screen, looking a little worn out. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about the future, and honestly, it's scary." I nodded, even though obviously he couldn't see me. "Yeah, same, but scary doesn't mean impossible." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I got offered an extension on the internship, another 6 months. It's amazing for my career, but it would mean even longer apart." That hit me harder than I expected. I'd been trying to stay optimistic, but the reality was sinking in. 6 more months. Another half year of navigating this weird in-between space. "Are you going to take it?" He looked down at his hands, fingers tapping nervously. "I don't know. Part of me wants to, but part of me wants to come home and just be with you." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I don't want to hold you back." A sad smile tugged at his lips. "You're not. I'm just scared about what happens if we wait too long." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the conversation hanging between us. Finally, I said, "Maybe we can make a plan. Like, set a date for when we can be in the same place again." He nodded slowly. "That makes sense." Over the next few days, we mapped out a timeline. I'd finish the semester, and he'd wrap up his internship. Then, hopefully, we'd find a way to be closer, at least for a while. But even with a plan, the distance gnawed at us. There were moments of frustration when a call dropped, or when time zones messed with our schedules. I caught myself scrolling through old photos of us, that goofy selfie from the poetry reading, the one where his eyes were crinkled in laughter. I missed him. I missed the way his presence could fill a room and calm the storm in my mind. One Saturday, after a particularly rough week, I called him without much thought. He answered on the second ring, surprise and relief in his voice. "Hey." "Hey," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just wanted to hear you." We ended up on the phone for hours, talking about everything, the good, the bad, the mundane. At one point, I caught myself saying, "I wish you were here." "I wish I was too," he said softly. That simple admission felt like a lifeline. Months passed, and finally, the day came. Alex's internship ended, and I was standing at the bus station, heart pounding as I scanned the crowd for him. When he appeared, suitcase in hand, I felt like the whole world had snapped back into focus. We didn't say much at first, just held each other like we'd never let go. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of rediscovery, finding new favorite spots around town, binge-watching shows, and planning our next steps. We talked seriously about where we wanted to live, what we wanted from life, and how we could support each other through it all. It wasn't perfect. We had disagreements, moments of doubt, and fears that crept in when we least expected them. But every time, we chose to work through it, to listen, to hold on. One evening, after a lazy Sunday brunch, Alex turned to me, eyes bright, with something I hadn't seen before. "Do you think we're ready for the next step? Moving in together?" My breath caught. The idea had crossed my mind countless times, but hearing him say it out loud made it real and terrifying. "I want that," I said, heart pounding, "more than anything." He smiled, a little shy now. "Me too." We spent the next few days apartment hunting, exploring tiny studios and cozy one-bedrooms. Nothing felt quite right until we found a small place near campus with tall windows and enough space for chaos and calm. Signing the lease felt like the first promise we made to each other that we were in this for real. The day we moved in, the apartment was messy and half empty, but it already felt like home. We unpacked boxes, argued over furniture placement, and laughed until our stomachs hurt. That night, lying tangled in sheets that smelled like freshly washed laundry and Alex's cologne, I realized how far we'd come from that sleepy library bench. Love had found us in the most unexpected way, through exhaustion, distance, and uncertainty, and now it was ours to hold on to. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see where this story would take us next. Living together wasn't all sunshine and roses. There were nights when we'd argue over the thermostat, or who forgot to buy milk, and mornings when one of us was cranky from too little sleep. But those moments only made the good ones feel more real. Like waking up to the weight of his hand in mine, or cooking dinner side by side while sharing stories about our day. One evening, after a long week of work and classes, we found ourselves sprawled on the couch, the city lights twinkling outside the window. Alex looked over at me and just smiled, a quiet, content smile that said everything without words. I felt the same way. "You know," I said, "I never thought waking up next to a stranger in the library would lead here." He laughed softly. "Neither did I, but I'm glad it did." We talked about how far we'd come, the fears we'd faced, the distance we'd crossed, and the trust we'd built. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough. "I feel like this," I said, gesturing between us, "is what I was waiting for. Not some perfect moment or clear plan, but this, us." Alex squeezed my hand gently. "Yeah, me too." In that quiet room, filled with soft light and the hum of the city, I realized love isn't about grand gestures or flawless timing. It's about showing up, day after day, choosing someone even when it's hard. It's about the small, ordinary moments that, stitched together, make a life. I reached over and kissed him, soft, easy, full of everything we'd lived through. And as we settled back into each other's arms, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Home. Maybe that sleepy morning in the library was just the beginning. But it was the kind of beginning that mattered, the kind that leads you somewhere real, messy, and beautiful. And honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything.